Society. She is coordinating the development of an Indiana Plants of Concern community science monitoring program in partnership with the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance and the Indiana Natural Heritage Data Center at the Indiana DNR Division of Nature Preserves. Jill is going to present to us today about citizen science programs, a key piece in conserving Indiana's rare plants. Let's welcome Jill Casey.
Can you guys hear me? Good morning. My name is Jill Casey, and I'm here to talk to you about community science programs and why they're a key part in conserving Indiana's rare plants. So, why community science? Community science has a pretty long history dating back to at least the 1800s. The first official government-sponsored program in community science is the North American Bird Phenology Program, which started in the late 1800s. Then we have in 1901 the Audubon Christmas Bird Count, which is the longest-running community science program. And the term citizen science was coined by MIT Technology Review in 1989. You'll hear both of these terms. We tend to use community science some as a little bit more inclusive term, but they tend to mean the same thing. And then today we have a pretty wide range of different community science programs that exist across a variety of different disciplines. So we have programs related to birds and insects and plants. And then, of course, there's the economic impact of these programs. So there was a study done in 2015 of 388 different biodiversity programs, which found the estimated annual value of in-kind volunteerism for just those programs to exceed $2.5 billion. A quick definition of terms that we'll use throughout this presentation. So element occurrence. This is the specific geographic region where a species is known to exist or to have existed. State extirpated. This is a species that is originally thought to be native to Indiana, but where there are not any currently known populations in the state. Historical. These are species that are only known from historical records. They haven't been recently located, but there's some hope of rediscovery. State endangered, this typically refers to species with 5 or fewer occurrences left in Indiana. State threatened, this is species where there is between 6 and 20 occurrences remaining. SNR, this is unranked species. S1, critically imperiled, so think of it as similar to endangered. S2 is imperiled, so think of it as similar to threatened. And then S3, these are vulnerable species. So what is the impact of this on Indiana? So in Indiana, there are 5,154 plant element occurrences within Indiana's database. This includes 1,773 endangered, 3,284 threatened, and 97 extirpated. When you compare this to the 736 reports submitted via Survey 123 in 2023 and 2024, you can see that there's a pretty large gap that exists between those element occurrences that are rare versus those that are actively being monitored. I'm going to give you some species-specific examples. All of these are species that are monitored by INPCA, and they still persist in the state. But this is, for each of these, there's one element occurrence that we're going to talk about where monitoring may have benefited the persistence of that occurrence. So first of all, we have striped gentian. There are only 5 element occurrences to historical. One of the remaining consisted of 8 individuals in 2014 and was not monitored again until 2020. And then when monitoring was done in 2020, 2022, and 2024, no individuals were found at that specific occurrence. You'll hear more about each of these species in the reports later as well. Prairie parsley, this one had 11 element occurrences with 2 extirpated and 1 historical. An element occurrence was reported as 3 plants in 1992 and 7 plants in 2000. No reports were done again until 2022 and 2023, where no individuals were found at that occurrence. And then finally, prairie fameflower, 19 element occurrences with 6 extirpated and 1 historical. An element occurrence was observed in 1948 and then not again until 1989. That was not found at that element occurrences in 1989 or in recent years when monitoring was done. Then we're going to talk about a couple programs that exist that are doing community science or plant monitoring. First, I want to talk about Chicago Botanic Gardens. We have Gretel with us here today who manages that program. Wave and say hi, Gretel. So this program, participants started in this program in the year 2000. They've engaged over 1,100 volunteers and have monitored over 687 species. They launched the Plants of Concern app in 2021, which is a mobile app used for rare plant monitoring. We have some really interesting success stories that have come out of this program. So they've been able to identify the natural community types that are associated with endangered and threatened plant species. They've relocated 9 historical species. And the DNR was able to update the S ranks for 330 species, many of which had not been updated since 1987. You can see you have 28 species that were previously unranked that became S1 or S2 species. You have 26 S1 species that became historical or extirpated, 81 S1 species that were downgraded, and 7 S2 species that were upgraded. Plants of concern data has also been used in more than 20 reports by more than 20 different authors. And the data has been used for viability studies, viability assessments, and also to study the effectiveness of different management protocols. Starflower data from Plants of Concern was used and compared to Minnesota and Wisconsin's data to assess the threats of climate change. And it also helped to validate the data that said that a lower plant density helps rare plants persist. Plants of Concern data was also used in a statewide mapping project, which mapped the relative density of rare plants throughout the state. So if you see here, the green dots are areas of lower rare plant density versus red dots being very high rare plant density. Another program that we're going to talk about is Wisconsin's program. Their program started in 2013. They use Survey 123 and iNaturalist for reporting. They have over 200 active volunteers and have trained over 600. Their volunteers have submitted over 2,000 rare plant reports. And participation in this program varies pretty widely from one report ever to more than 20 per season. Some interesting success stories out of Wisconsin's program. So in 2023, 31 populations of rare plants were found in areas that they had not been previously seen. A volunteer also found Maryland senna, which had not been seen in the state since 1911. When observing this species, the volunteer identified brush encroachment in the area, and together with the DNR, they were able to cut back the threat from the encroachment to help that species persist. Another one is the federally threatened eastern French orchid. This species had not been observed since 2007, but was located again in 2014 when monitors assessed threat from encroachment for this species as well. They were able to eliminate some of the threat of encroachment, and also using this data, the DNR was able to get funding for additional remediation for habitat in 2016. Some rediscoveries that Wisconsin has had. In 2022, a volunteer found clustered broom rape, which is a parasitic plant that hadn't been seen in the state in 40 years. In 2021, a volunteer found maidenhair spleenwort, which hadn't been seen in 90 years. In 2020, a volunteer found English sundew, which hadn't been seen in 40 years. And information from this program has been able to be used to update the state's wildlife action plan. Volunteers in this program also report a high level of satisfaction with both being able to visit high quality natural areas as well as contributing to plant conservation. Kevin Doyle, the botanist for the Wisconsin DNR, says every year there are these discoveries or rediscoveries of things that hadn't been seen in a really long time. Here's a list of a few other programs that are currently doing rare plant monitoring through community science, including Minnesota Plant Watch, University of Washington Botanic Gardens, Rare Plant Monitoring Network of Southwest Oregon, Appalachian Trail Conservancy, and the Arboretum at Flagstaff. So what's the plan for Indiana? So the current state of Indiana's program is, the first step is I was hired in September 2024 as the program facilitator for this program using a matching grant from the Sam Shine Foundation. The Indiana Native Plant Society and the DNR have been working together to form implementation plans. We've been in talks with the Chicago Botanic Gardens about the use of the Plants of Concern app, with the plan of using Survey 123 as a backup to be adapted. And then Scott has identified 60 species to monitor, including 14 watch list species, with the criteria for these species that have been selected being ease of identification, showiness, easy access to the occurrences, so on public lands, and a global rank when it comes to watch list species. So we intend to roll out this project in 3 phases, with the first phase beginning in the spring or summer of this year, with INPCA team members being part of this first phase. We anticipate that this first phase will incorporate 15 sites. And based on the feedback from this first group, we will incorporate that into later phases of the project. Phase 2 will begin in winter 2025 and 2026, where we'll begin recruiting retired botanists and skilled amateurs for the second group. And with this group, together with group 1, we anticipate monitoring between 30 and 60 sites. Finally, group 3, we anticipate rolling out in 2026 to 2027 with a process for matching volunteers with specific sites or plants. And we anticipate that group 3 will go out with people who are skilled monitors to ensure that they are comfortable with the process. So how do I get involved? There are 3 main ways to get involved with this program. The first one being to join a rare species conservation team. You can find that information on the INPCA page and reach out to the leaders of those groups to join one of the teams. Option 2 is you can wait for phase 2 and wait for our communications, where we'll be reaching out in next winter. And then finally, we hope that you will consider supporting this program. You have a QR code on your table to donate to this program. We need to raise funds to support this program. So if you're interested, please take a look and consider contributing. Questions?
Thank you very much, Jill. I'm familiar with the plants of the Chicago region, their monitoring protocol, and it takes maybe an hour or so in the field. Do you have a feeling as you get rolling the time that will be spent in the field as people begin to collect the data?
I think that will, and Scott can probably support this, I think that will very much depend on the species. I think that if you're counting a few species, a few individuals versus a large amount of individuals and trying to estimate, I think that could vary quite a bit. But we do anticipate using Chicago's program for learnings on how to best monitor.
What kind of data are you taking? So in the plant app.
So the Plants of Concern app, and similarly what we would develop for Survey 123, tracks a number of different things. So it tracks the total number of individuals, and there are phases of whether they're flowering, whether they've set seeds, what potential threats are in the area, what species associates might be present. And I think we'll kind of, as we go through phase 1, get a sense of what of that information is most useful to track, but that is what is tracked currently through Plants of Concern.
What is the plan for reviewing this data and making use of it?
So in terms of making use of the data that are collected by volunteers, our plan is to incorporate those data into our National Heritage Data Center database with the other 700 and however many reports we've gotten in the last 2 years, as Jill mentioned. And so hopefully that will bolster the number of reports that we get per year, long beyond this 3-year period that Jill has talked about, where we're getting into the thousands of reports each year on these plants. And then those will be used to help us make determinations on if there should be changes to our endangered or threatened species list, the status of those species. If we know that we have over 5 occurrences of a plant that we consider endangered because folks have been monitoring, we're seeing that population doing well, maybe there's management happening now for that population, then maybe it get moved to threatened and ultimately get removed from that list. Since I have the mic. I think, so you mentioned that I had given you 60 species, and I was thinking that folks could monitor, that we would have folks choose from to monitor. And I was thinking of probably having known sites for these because nobody wants to go to a site where something hasn't been seen and not find it, right? But the information that you shared from the Chicago Botanic Garden project and the Wisconsin project had folks finding occurrences that had not been seen in many, many years. How do you anticipate us including some of those types of populations in our program as well? And how do you get people excited about going to something that they likely will not find, or that there's a good chance of?
Let me see if I can remember both parts of your question. So in terms of reporting things that had not, that are not the assigned species that they are there to monitor, I think that certainly would be useful information to have if the folks are coming across things that they can positively identify as a rare plant species. I think that information would be really good to have, and I know that there is on iNaturalist a rare plants of Indiana project that folks could kind of report to as a first step before going through the full reporting process that I know your team monitors. So if those could be positively identified as correct, then going through the full process of how we add this to the database, I think would be useful. And then in terms of having folks go out to sites where something may or may not be seen, where they have a chance of not coming across the plant that they've been sent out to monitor. I think reiterating to them that a negative identification is also important, that it's important to know if something is not there, just as it is too important to know that it is there. And just because it isn't seen that one time, go back at the next interval and see whether it's.
And if I could add on to that answer, that I'm still, we all have different motivations for why we like rare plants and monitoring them. And the volunteers that we try and recruit, some may be more driven by geography. They want something within a half hour of home. And others may be more driven by species. And I think those are the people who would be willing to go out and monitor every element occurrence of a given species. I think it's easier to get those people excited, but that they may not see individual that one element occurrence if they're able to see it elsewhere and just realize that the species is in some of the element occurrences and not in others. So those people who are driven by loving a particular species or interest in that, I think might be more willing to go to places where nothing has been seen in 50 years and still looking.
What level of training or educational background is required of volunteers to maintain the accuracy of the database?
So we anticipate for the group 3 volunteers that this can be a pretty broad range that you don't, certainly in our earlier phases, we want folks that have the skill to be able to accurately identify the species. But we hope that with the third phase of the project, when we're rolling it out to a general population, the bar is much lower, that we give the training, we give species that are appropriate for that volunteer's level of knowledge, and that, with our criteria that we've set, that these are easy to identify, showy species, so that they are able to go in there and say, yes, I can verify that this is the thing that I was sent to monitor. And also going out for their first time with an experienced volunteer, so that they are making sure that they understand what that species is.
Yes, is there an opportunity for, I'm just thinking about, so I work with White River Alliance on our water quality assessment that contributes to the item database. And so we require an 8-hour training for volunteers to make sure that they maintain that accuracy. So I guess that's where my question stems from is there an ability to do like an online training we just make one time so that volunteers have the ability to look at certain features of plants so that you're doing less oversight maybe than I mean, obviously there would need to be oversight, but just like that's I guess where my question was.
Yeah, so we anticipate, we intend to have training as part of the program, training on what that monitoring process looks like and how to account for each individual that they've been sent to monitor. It gets a little bit tricky when we're talking about creating trainings for specific species. I think that could get untenable pretty quickly, especially when we're talking about not just the species that you've been sent to monitor, but also, associates that you are recording. And I think that is really where going out the first time with an experienced monitor is invaluable. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
Jill, thank you for your presentation and thank you for the work that you and the rest of the collaborators have done to get this going in Indiana. You mentioned a website or online to learn more information. Could you explain again where to find that?
So there is an INPCA page on the Indiana Native Plant Society website, and it's linked up just in the main navigation on the Indiana Native Plants Society site, which is indiananativeplants.org. And you can find INPCA's progress with each of the individual monitoring teams there, as well as who is the lead on each of the species conservation teams.
But that's for the regions, right? But for this proto plants of concern program, is there anything?
We don't have anything yet. I think we will have more information available after we do this kind of first pilot program with the first group.
Society. She is coordinating the development of an Indiana Plants of Concern community science monitoring program in partnership with the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance and the Indiana Natural Heritage Data Center at the Indiana DNR Division of Nature Preserves. Jill is going to present to us